Neil Allen Schienbein was the youngest of 5 boys for Edwin and Helen Schienbein, born in Calgary on January 20th, 1957. His brother Ralph wrote that he remembers clearly when Neil was born. He said, "We were with our dad at a neighbor's place when a call came. When Dad hung up, it was with the pronouncement, 'It's a boy.' Ron and I lobbied for the names Neil and Alan, our childhood friends. They were pretty pleased with themselves when the names that they wanted were chosen. In a way, Neil grew up in a very different family than his older brothers. When he was still a toddler, his older brothers were already going to boarding school in Concordia, first in Edmonton and then in Nebraska. He was used to Jerry and Richard coming and going, and like a lot of little brothers, he really looked up to them.
Ron and Ralph, who were a little younger and still at home, often took Neil with them around and to different places. And Ralph remembers he would take Neil to Bethlehem Church for a toddler group. He'd take him over there in his bike carrier, drop him off, and then he was supposed to go back and pick him up. One day he went to get him, but he wasn't there. So panic set in anyway, and he looked everywhere. He hadn't realized that he'd gone off to a friend's and was happily playing there with toys. When Neil was about 7 or 8, his oldest brother Jerry would sometimes bring girls home from the school for a home-cooked meal made special by their mom. And one Sunday, Neil was helping dish up the dessert, and a scoop fell off of the ice cream and onto the table. His eyes grew really wide, and he's like, "Whoops!" As he picked it up with his chubby little hands and placed it back in the bowl, and he's like, "This has got to go first to the guest." So he was really proud as he delivered that bowl to the guest.
Neil was our youngest uncle, which also made him pretty cool, in my opinion. One of my first memories of him was at Christmas time when I was about 5, and he brought all of us presents that we wouldn't have gotten from our parents. Mine was a kid's makeup kit. It let you mix up your own lipstick and blush, and I knew I wasn't allowed to wear makeup, but because it was a Christmas present, I got to keep it. Neil loved to give gifts, and he put a lot of thought into them. Ralph was saying he remembers spending days looking for Christmas presents with Neil when he was younger, and it reminded me of a time in my teens when I did the same. He'd come up to Cold Lake to spend the holidays with us and really wanted to get presents for everyone. He was really generous. Sometimes I thought a little too generous. I remember him taking me to Radio Shack with him, and he chose a remote-controlled car for my brother, which I thought was too expensive. But our Uncle Neil, he got him one anyway. Of course, I didn't think he was too generous with me, but I was just helping him out. He wasn't just generous with gifts, he was generous even with his own possessions, often giving to someone he felt was in greater need than he was, even at times when he was in great need himself. He was selfless in that way.
One of my earlier memories was reading his Richie Rich comic books. Even though he thought we might tear them and they were special, he still let us read them even though we couldn't actually read, and sharing his Pringles. I was so fascinated by Pringles, being just in a can. I mean, they didn't come like that. And I asked him how the potatoes what kind of potatoes they used to get those perfectly shaped chips. So he had a pretty good laugh with that one. He would also share his music that he'd pick up at youth group, and like DeGarmo and Key and Second Chapter of Acts, as well as his Isaac Airfreight 8-tracks and later cassettes with us. You probably all know how much of a huge sports fan he was, probably can tell, especially of the Edmonton Eskimos and Toronto Raptors. He was such a fan he couldn't really understand why other people wouldn't be as big of fans. And as a kid, I would collect a lot of stuff for the Eskimos and the Oilers, but that was probably because I liked collecting rather than I actually liked the team. But I'd always bring them in to show him my newest additions to my Eskimo cards, and he would call later in later years and recently, like he'd be saying, "Oh, are you watching the Toronto game?" And it's like, no, I wouldn't even know it was on. So that kind of surprised him. And he wasn't just a sports fan, but he really was he liked sports of all kinds. In his high school days, he was involved constantly in sports, so much so that the school even gave him his own set of keys and just left him to lock up. Like, you're in charge of this. So he was pretty proud of the trust that the school placed in him for that.
I remember that our Uncle Neil always had the coolest stuff. I remember going to our grandparents and he'd left all these 8-tracks there and his Mad magazine collection, which I couldn't really understand at the time, but I knew my brothers were laughing at it, so I thought they were pretty great. He was a big fan of humor, and obviously he was a big fan of puns. His love of wordplay began around the supper table when he was a kid. He said that he and his brothers would banter back and forth, laughing as each tried to outdo the other. Jokes and puns were a special connection that they shared despite the age gap. One of Neil's favorite memories was when the family got together to butcher a pig. Neil had started a job as a butcher, following in his dad's footsteps. Standing there alongside his dad, sharing something they had in common meant a lot to him. When his dad leaned over and said, "You're doing a really good job," Neil's heart almost burst with pride. It was so meaningful to him, he said, hearing those words from his dad, a former butcher. It meant the world to him. Neil really did love working as a meat cutter. And if you'd gone shopping with him, he would tell you what the best cut of meat was in the store. And he would usually be pretty frustrated looking behind the counter and seeing there was not a bandsaw, and that the guys back there didn't seem to know what they were doing. He also said that by cutting meat, it helped him with his art. He learned how muscles worked and how things should be. And for him, that was really fascinating. The meat cutting was an art form for him, and so was his art later. Yeah.
So yeah, that knowledge helped him to really work on his art, and he really liked to draw pictures of animals. So another proud moment that he had was when they had an art show at the Edmonton Public Library, and they featured his art. And he'd been standing nearby listening to some women discussing the art, and oh, this is the meaning behind the artist, you know, this is the ideas, and oh, you can see as you look deeply into this how much he's really kind of committed to this. And he leaned over and he's actually, well, actually I was just drew it because I liked it. And they were like, what? So they actually made him pull out his license and she compared the signatures to make sure he was actually the artist. But yeah, he had a pretty good chuckle over that for a while.
His love for art actually started when he was still a young boy. His brother Ron had drawn some pictures on his bedroom wall. And he was so in awe that Ron could draw something so impressive that he wanted to be able to draw and create something that other people would also enjoy the way he did. Although Neil was more of an introvert than an extrovert, he did enjoy hanging out with the people that he loved and admired. When he was young, he would follow his big brothers on adventures. Ralph and Jerry were reminiscing the other day about a camping trip they took to the mountains with Neil. They were hiking around Yoho and got to a creek that needed to be crossed. There was a huge log that made crossing perilous, but dry. The day was hot and muggy. The flies were terrible. Normal hikers would have taken water with them on a day like that, but not the Schienbein boys. They were too tough or possibly too ill prepared for that. Neil was not confident about crossing the slippery log, weak from heat and dehydration, so he decided to cross on his hands and knees. He didn't want to get swept away. Ralph and Jerry thought it was so funny watching him cross, thumb in the air, that they took a picture vowing never to forget. When they finally came down from the tree line, they walked right into the lake, boots and all, for relief from the flies and heat. He probably should have just crossed that creek.
Neil also said how much he enjoyed the family get-togethers and get-togethers with good friends like the Kellers, which usually involved playing cards and singing, and his dad would pull out the guitar and accompany them. And there were many inside jokes and little things, creations like that the SWAC group came up with, and different memorable songs sung by Auntie Bernice that are unforgettable. And one of his trips with his mom and dad that he said was really memorable was a trip down to Seward, Nebraska to watch his brother Richard graduate. He said the drive seemed to take forever, but he was comparing it to his previous trips to Saudi and Lemberg, where his parents were from, which he thought were long trips. So he said going to this foreign country and seeing this new landscape was pretty impressive, especially how high the corn grew. So that was something that really was memorable for them, and he was really excited that he got to see where his brothers had been going for a while and kind of got to experience a little bit of their life farther away.
Many of you know that Neil's life wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. He had many dark days and made some bad choices. Many of us prayed for him that he would turn his life over to God's control. So it was with great joy when we saw this happen in his life in recent years. We started to notice a big change in him at the same time as he started talking about We Care. It was clear that God was doing something in him. He was talking more about God's goodness. He was praying and sharing Bible verses.
You're supposed to laugh.
He had direction and purpose that had been missing for many years.
He would often talk about, he'd call me every Sunday in the evening and he'd tell me how it went that day and how many people that they got to help, and it just had a really special place in his heart. And he's like, it just made me feel like I was wanted and part of something. And through this ministry, we could see his life was changed. He built friendships there that really ran deep. And serving with them just said was such a special chance that he'd had. And he talked about the fellows there as his brothers. And so it was really neat to see how important this had come. Our whole family had noticed the change. His brother Ralph, just a few weeks ago, was saying that he just noticed that Neil was portraying that he was God's child. And he's like, you could just tell that in his life, how excited he was about that. He was so excited to talk about meeting God, meeting him face to face. And so it's a memorial that he leaves behind, the fact that he was redeemed. And for all of us holding this celebration on an Easter Monday, it's a reminder that the old and broken Neil of years past was crucified with Christ and reborn as a child of God and sharing in this resurrection.
What that means for us is that we have a confidence that we'll see him again. One of the first things that came to mind when I heard of Neil's passing from this life into the next is that death has been beaten. In 1 Corinthians 15 it says, "Then when our dying bodies have been transformed into bodies that never die, this scripture will be fulfilled. Death is swallowed up in victory." One of the reasons I follow Jesus is because I want to be with my friends and family forever. And I'm so glad that this is a desire that I share with Jesus himself. He wanted so much to be with those that he loved forever that he willingly gave up his life and took the burden of our sins so that this could be accomplished. And then because he's God and nothing's impossible for him, he demolished death. Death has been swallowed up in life. The evening of April 4th, our uncle went to celebrate this victory with his friend, Jesus. He's already enjoying all the unconditional love, freedom, and joy that heaven offers. And although it's hard to say goodbye for now, I'm so glad for all the reunions we can look forward to as children of God.
I chose this shirt is obviously clergy shirt, but the color is the color for Easter in the liturgical calendar. That's why I chose to wear it. It's the color of resurrection and victory. And that's what this is all about. I met Neil in 1977, so that's almost 40 years ago. It was in May, actually. And we kind of instantly became close to one another. There's a gift that God's put in me that I've always appreciated as a pastor. And he doesn't do it all the time, but he does it enough time. That when I meet some people, God shows me what he's put in them, what he wants them to do, what he wants them to be. Neil was one of those guys. A lot of people told me, don't spend so much time with Neil, but I spent a lot of time with Neil. And I did it because I could see who God intended him to be. And he became that man in some ways, in other ways, not so much. But we had a lot of fun together, Neil and I. I'm not going to go into all our things we did together. They're not for public consumption. But we did have a lot of fun. I remember driving him home and holding his head while he threw up on his parents' lawn. After a drinking bout that he had, phoned me and said, "You need to come get me." I remember that very clearly. It was so much fun. And we did a lot of things. Neil had a lot of different interests, but his biggest interest was always in Jesus. And we talked a lot about guns back then. Neil was very into guns. If you know him, you know that. Yet we don't usually talk about it very much. It's not acceptable today. It wasn't real acceptable then, but we did. We went out in the woods and basically played war with a bunch of our friends. That was a good time, a lot of fun that we did. You know, and Neil.
You should make clear they were not real guns.
Oh, they weren't real guns. That's my wife. But they looked real. We bought replica guns. So I remember we did it once in what's the name of that park? No, it wasn't Rumble's, the next one. The one I go to all the time. Hermitage Park. We were in the back there, and we were all in camouflage, and we had, I had an M16, looked as real as could be, right? People were in the park looking at us. But we had fun. I could tell a lot of stories about that, but that's not what I'm here for. What I saw in Neil was a man who truly loved God, and out of that love for God grew a love for the poor. He really gave himself. The poor Oilers, he liked that. I remember when I went to his apartment where he lived, he said, "You can park here for an Oilers game now, because it's like a block away from the new Coliseum." And he loved sports, all right. But his love for the poor was greater than that. I don't know a lot about this thing that he did on Sundays. I'm not sure who the guy is even talking about it. What's it called again?
We Care.
We Care.
Yeah.
You know, he invited me to come. I'm a little busy on Sunday morning, so I haven't made it yet. One day, maybe. But I was impressed with what he told me about it and the people who are connected to it. And I knew some of the people who were connected to it as well. And it was apparently quite a beautiful ministry. I do want to participate at some point. I have to say, you know, all the time I spent with Neil over the years, the best time probably I ever had with him was on April 4th this year. I was home and I was praying, which is basically what I do these days. And I was praying away, and I was praying for Neil, and God says to me, "You need to go see him today." I said, "Okay." So I went. And we spent a couple hours together in his room, and it was just a joy. The first hour or so was talking about the stuff I just shared with you, some of the fun things we did and things we enjoyed together. Some of the stuff we did, stuff where we almost got caught. Some stuff where we did get caught. And then that sort of faded away, and I asked Neil if, you know, how is he feeling? Are you ready to die? Pastors ask blunt questions like that. And he said, yeah, I'm ready. I said, "Is there anything you need to confess before death comes?" And he confessed a thing or two, and I was able to announce forgiveness to him, pray with him. I anointed him with oil, prayed over him for healing and for, you know, the forgiveness of sins. And then we had communion together, and that was absolutely special. Mind-blowingly special. Communion can be such a good thing, and it always is in my life. And I have it every week at least once. But this was beyond that. This was a time of intimacy with the Father. This was a time where, you know, very special things happened. So we did that. And when we were done, Neil was starting to doze off a little bit. And I said, "Well, is there anything you want?" And he says, "The one thing I want," this is what he told me, was to sing for Going Home to be played at his funeral. That's a great song, one of my all-time favorite songs. So You can play it at my funeral too, if you want. And then I said, I guess I'll leave. It looks like you need to get some sleep. And he said, yeah, and he was fine. He said he wasn't feeling any pain or anything, right? So I went on about my business, got home a couple hours later, Doug phones, and he says, Neil passed away this afternoon. I'm like, wow. God knew what he was doing. And he was ready. So God bless you. God bless you, Neil. I know he is. And Father, I thank you for the gift of Neil. Bless our hearts as we remember him today. Amen.
No.
As I was listening to you talking about the war games and whatnot, I thought, boy, you guys really must have put on the armor of God. I thought they were real guns too. Good afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Zane McFlora, and I'm one of Neil's friends. On behalf of our We Care team, my wife Penny and myself, we want to express our deepest sympathies to the Schienbein family. And listening to some of the stories, I wish I knew Neil a long time ago. Sounds like he was a great person. You know, it's very sad that Neil's life, ended so soon. It's difficult to put into words how much I will miss him. And I will miss him dearly. We were very good friends. But I do know we all have our own personal and special moments that Neil left in our hearts and our lives. And I believe we're all here today because somewhere, somehow, we've all been touched by Neil. Whether it was 40 years ago or 3 weeks ago, we're all touched by him. I met Neil approximately 5 years ago at the We Care outdoor church parking lot. This is a ministry made up of volunteers, which included Neil, who came out Sunday mornings to provide support for those who are less fortunate by offering packed lunches, hot soup, bakery goods, and words of wisdom, offering hope. At first, Neil came to pick up some extra food items to help me get by through the week. At that time, he was struggling. We quickly connected and became friends. And it wasn't long after that Neil started serving at the bread table and then became one of our regular core volunteers. Neil was a strong person by his character, personality, his presence. His faith in the Lord was expressed through his serving and his compassion towards everyone, no matter where they were in their walk of life. I enjoyed many special times with Neil, going for breakfast, going for brunch, going to the odd Eskimo football game, taking him shopping, and just doing all kinds of errands for him. There's one thing I did not enjoy, and that was cleaning out fluffy FBs and little poops, kitty litter box. So I'll tell you a little story. Neil had his heart attack. He was in the hospital and he was really concerned about his cats. I mean, he just loved his cats. He said, Zane, someone's got to go feed these cats. Would you do it for me? I'm like, yeah, I've done it before, sure. He says, I'll give you the keys to get into the apartment and then into my suite. And he told me where the food was. I said, fine. So we talked a bit and whatnot. And just before I was going to leave, he says, oh, by the way, the kitty litter box is probably full. They're going to need to clean that out. And like, that I did not want to do. Me and cats and the smell of cats and all that, it just doesn't go hand in hand. So I'm like, okay, I said I'd do it. So I'm driving home and I got to think of a plan now. Plan B, well, how am I going to get out of this? So at least I don't have to do the kitty litter box. So first thing I thought of, I could phone up one of the other friends, give them a call, say, listen, I'm not feeling good. Could you help me out? And I thought, well, that wouldn't be right. You know, I said to Neil, I would do it. So the next thing I thought is, I was going to give Sean Rankin, who's here, a phone call and say, hey, Sean, could you come help me to feed Neil's cats? And the plan was, while we're in there, I was going to say, hey, look at the kitty litter box. It's got to get clean. You know, I'll feed the cats. You know, could you do that while I'm doing this? No, I never did it. So now I'm like, Lord, what am I going to do? And I came up with a plan. At home, when I do like sanding and, you know, things that kind of smell and whatnot, I have a 3M mask. And I wear that. So, here's the mask. I decided this is what I'm going to use to go, at least to clean up the kitty litter box, right? So I go to the apartment in the evening. I get there and I get in, and you got to go up some stairs, and there's a door that goes into the hallway. I open that door. Neil's door was right to the left. It's pitch black in there. The power had gone off. And all there was a just a little emergency light. So you can hardly see, right? I'm like, oh, great, you know. So I get in there and I'm trying the key. And Neil told me before I left, the key does not work well. You got to do this and twist and, you know, do a bunch of stuff. And I'm trying. I couldn't get it. I'm getting pretty frustrated. So now I'm starting to kind of hit the door, and it's getting loud, right? And at the same time, you got to imagine this. I'm wearing this because as soon as the door opens, the kitty litter box is literally right there. So I'm like, I turn around, and here's a lady. She's standing there about 5 feet away from me, and she's got that look on her face like, what the hell are you doing? Who are you? Right? And I'm like, I had the same look when I had a mask on, so you couldn't see, right? So I just took the mask off, and I said, I'm Neil's friend, and I'm here to feed the cats. I can't get in. I said, this darn key doesn't work. I think it's the wrong key. So she looked at me, and she said, no, I'll open the door for you. So she opened the door, she let me in, and I did what I had to. But I thought later about, you know, it's a good thing it wasn't some great big 6'3" guy, you know, or she wasn't standing there with a baseball bat, you know, thinking I'm a criminal. So I told that to Neil later. I said, man, I said, you just about got me in a lot of trouble. But the job was done. Of course, Neil was brilliant when it came to his puns. You all know about that, right? He constantly caught us off guard, making us think, you know, what did he just say? Like we'd go out for lunch or whatever, and he'd say something, and he'd come back with the fun, and he'd like, what? Oh, right, yeah, you know, got us again. So I'll just give a couple examples that he used a lot around us. He'd say, you know, my name is Neil. Like, let's say he was meeting somebody new. My name is Neil. I'm a verb. Kneeling, right? I told him that well, he knew I had a lot of, I have a big yard. I do a lot of landscaping, a lot of yard work. So one time he says to me, you know, you should hire the same landscaper I used once. I'm like, really? Because I only use him in an apartment, right? He says, yeah. He said he was really easy to get along with. Right? Stuff like that. And then if we'd have to go, he'd say, let's make like a tree and leave. It's okay. But he was brilliant. And he just kept you off guard and he's punched out. One of the last things I said to Neil was that I felt so blessed and so happy that he loved Jesus Christ. No matter what happens to you here on earth, I believe that Jesus has a place prepared for you in heaven, and that it's probably a beautiful mansion. I said, one day, Neil, I'll be knocking on your door. Make sure you let me in. As he was lying there in his hospital bed, he looked at me with this big smile, and he had troubles talking, right? He just quietly, just that nice smile he had, kind of like you see in that picture. He just said, okay, I'll let you in. And that was just, wow, it was very, very special. The day before, yeah. So Neil's conquered death, and I believe he is in the presence of glory now. And I'm going to miss him. Yes, I parked at his parking lot many times for other games and whatnot, and I drive by there all the time, and it's like he's still there. You know, I still hasn't absorbed that he is gone. But he is gone. For a while. And the last thing is, He liked my hat, so I was going to wear it. This is Jesus. I wear this quite often to the week here outdoor church that we have. Because it is all about Jesus. It's all about the people who transform their lives. Thank you. All right.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mike. Schienbein family or Schienbein, I screwed up every time. He used to correct me every morning.
We do too.
My condolences for everybody, his friends, his relatives, everybody he touched, everybody he met. I was truly honored to be here today. I got a call from Doug Johnston, and it was one of those calls that you probably don't want to hear or make reference to, but it was there, and I had just visited Neil the day before too, and Doug had said he's gone, he's gone. And one of Neil's requests was for me to be here today, and just to talk a little bit about his, how can I say, his experiences at work, his life, or whatever. And it's kind of an interesting thing because as simple as it is, Neil, a simple man. That's all he was, to me anyway. He knew what he wanted out of life. He got what he needed. And for the life of me, I was trying to think, oh, geez, you know, I've only known the man since 2001. And the deal was, and then I reflected on that. And that was huge for me because that's a decade. Oh, it's more than a decade. Oh my goodness. There's a lifestyle there. There's a life, you know, there's things that I did with Neil that, you know, I consider myself to be very, very fortunate to be here today and truly honored. And my history is simple. I had a previous career. It was a long one. It was a military career. I met countless people, lots of acquaintances. And I only keep in touch with maybe one or two of those people over the years. And Neil was one of those people that I truly believe that, you know, when I met him, he became my teacher to some aspect of things. And just a brief history is quite simple. He worked at the same place I did. We usually took the same bus together in the morning. We usually went to work at the same time, as I said, with a coffee. I had a cigarette, he had a cigarette. He had his Pepsi, I had my caffeine, my coffee, and there we were, first thing in the morning. So our first half hour, we were just talking about nothing. Every day for, I don't know, 10 years. And that just, it just blew me away when I started thinking about today. What am I going to say about Neil? Wasn't really nothing to say, really. Just the fact is that everything everybody said today was right on the mark. And thank you so much, Grace and Christina. You filled in the blanks for the years that I didn't know him. And it was relative to everything. See, Neil was he was in the custodial world. And what he did at work is one of those things that says, it's a dirty job, but somebody's got to do it. And he did it without question, without complaining, as far as I know. He may have complained later, but he did it. So if you understand the custodial world, it's not very pleasant at times. There's things that you have to do that just, wow. Talk about cleaning a kitty litter box? Well, you multiply that by 10 in a public washroom, and I'll just leave that one alone. And there would Neil be in there. And, you know, he'd get called to do this, and he would do it. We'd have floods in the building, property management, right? So water's a bad thing. So he'd be there front and center. He'd get called. His job was the heavy-duty janitor. What did that mean? Well, I'm not so sure to date. I think it was just a term, just a technological term. A couple of stories that I would like to recount with you, or at least tell you that I'm sure you know this, but Neil, and again, I think I understand now from previous lives, before I met him, I'm sure he had a temper. I know it, for sure. And I think that temper probably got him to where he was at a certain point in life. Unfortunately, it probably caused a few of his health issues as well, I'm thinking. And at the end of the day, it was kind of like, okay, I could see him. And what he would do at work, as I could tell, is he'd grab his bottom lip, have a smoke, and stare off into space. And that hand, he would just clench it. And he had paws, he had bear paws. I could tell, he would do this. And what's the matter, Neil? I needed to go off. And I said, oh, okay, but not overly exuberant, not yelling, just, and I said, it's okay, Neil. Then we talk about it. And I don't know how many times we did that in the morning. In most cases, it was all benign stuff. And so I consider Neil to be a frontline soldier, where the metal meets the meat, literally. Well, I found out later what he did for a living previously. And it was a butcher. He did that for 17 years. I call it a butcher. He does meat cutting, meat carving, meat craving, whatever. And I said, okay. I would go back to where we worked. He worked till about 2:30 in the afternoon. So we'd go back. And he would be there sitting having a smoke with his legs crossed, with his Pepsi. And he'd have this book with him. And I said, what are you up to, Neil? Oh, he'd cover it up. I'm just doing some sketching. Oh, do you mind if I see? So I took a look. Holy man, he was really good. I didn't know that. And plus a book beside him, so he read, he drew. I said, oh goodness, you tried out for the Eskimos. I heard about later. He loved his cats, no doubt about it. And he named them whatever. And the reason I bring that up is because the scenario is that if anybody was ever proud, for those that are grandparents, parents, uncles, aunts, whatever, well look, here's the picture of our children. My niece, my nephew. Well, Neil had his cats. So there he'd be first thing in the morning. He'd have a cigarette dangling out of his face, had a flip open phone. Here, this is Tuffy and Little Poop. And he would go, and Neil, I really, dude, no, kitty pictures at work aren't there. So it's just not going to happen, right? But anyway, so the one biggest thing I'd like to mention is that I noticed Neil was humble, and his humility is kind of interesting because, again, with the way he lived and his lifestyle, and he used to come and go from work. I mean, I just didn't understand it. Like I really couldn't. Then I got a call one day. He was in trouble. He was at home. He said, Mike, I don't feel so good. So I remember, okay, Neil, I only live like a few blocks away. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll come over, I'll pick you up. So we went over, and he didn't look very good at all. The rest is history. He spent, I think, a few days in the hospital. And I remember this. I was in the hospital, and he brought something to me that I probably would never have encountered in my life, or hopefully some of us don't, was the idea that there was a man, while I was in the waiting room, I could hear him. And he was in so much pain. I said, oh my goodness. So the next evening, he's in the hospital for a few days. So I go visit him, and this was the first day he was in, and I went in, and the nurse was there. And he was all strapped up and everything, you've probably seen it, and it just doesn't look good, whatever. And the nurse looked at me, and she goes, listen, I'm busy. Can you feed him? And I said, okay. All right, I think I can get by this, And there I was for a few days, just doing my thing, and I said, this was brought to me, like, you know what I mean? I felt it. I said, okay, someone had a part in that, so I took that upon, and everybody else in his room for sure. I met Zane there, I think, once or twice, and a few other people, I'm sure, but I just don't remember. I think I met Christina in the hospital too. I think so. But anyway, so the bottom line is that when I met Neil, I've only known him for like 10 years or so, 15 years, and the deal, every day for 10 years, you get to know somebody a little bit. But outside of work, not so much. It was all about work, but at the same time, I socialized with them. We had a few drinks together, we had a few laughs, that kind of stuff, cigarettes, pop, whatever. But at the end of the day, I don't ever recall Neil being vengeful or just hurtful or malicious. I don't ever remember him doing that. Like outwards. I mean, that's what impressed me the most. So again, I'm truly honored today to be here and just talk a little bit about Neil, some of his stories. The one thing I want to mention is that the picture on the front is just a simple picture. And all it is Neil sitting on these machines at work. And those machines are machines that came later in his life and his career down at work. And at the beginning there was a push, and I knew he was strong then. And then this machine came on board. The one on the left in the picture is the first one. It's called a tenant machine, and it's got two wheels on the back and one in the middle. And it turns on a dime. So if you turn the wheel, it goes almost 90 degrees, and it pivots left and right. And to make a long story short, Neil had it for the first week, and at work there was this 4x4 foot pillar of drywall. And I remember hearing about that. So I'm coming to work, and I walk down, and I see this pillar. It's destroyed. I mean, there's caution tape around it. Oh, yeah, you know where this is going. Yeah, caution tape around it. And he was like, oh my God, what happened? Look like a crime scene. You know, I was looking for chalk lines, and I go, what happened here, right? So I go to work, and I asked, you know, his boss, Susanna, who's here today, by the way, and the former boss, and I said, yeah, so what happened? You know, so I guess what happened was he was driving it, and somebody kind of jumped up in front. And him being new to the driving world, I guess, he turned the wheel so sharp that it just banged into this stupid freaking... And it was a disaster, and he was so freaked out about it. Going to lose his job, didn't have a license, and all this good stuff. And then he ran into the freight elevator a couple of times with this machine. So finally we made up a license, and we gave it to him as a bit of a joke, right? So the reason for the picture, because he was crewman number 5. He's a closet Trekkie. And the idea was that we did a movie at work. I know. And he was part of that. And guess what happened to crewman number 5? Almost they die. So he got killed. There's a video. So yeah. So again, I just want to sum up by saying I'm really truly honored to be here today, and I will miss Neil for sure. Yeah, he was a good friend, and it just, you know, God sent him to me for a reason, and this is why I'm here today. So I really appreciate everybody, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Said, hey, I've got something to share. I'd like to sing a song. And of course I was like, okay, yeah, let's do that. It's 9 o'clock at night. What else tomorrow? Let's roll with it. So that's what we do, and I'm very thankful. My condolences as well to the entire Schienbein family. Still stumble, but I know how to spell it. I've worked on it. It's not easy.
Then die.
Yeah. Yeah. And to Mike, I want to thank you for sharing your stories. You're a blessing. You also are filling in all the pieces that I need to know too, and all of us here. We all had pieces of Neil, but never the complete story. And that's what makes today so special, is that we get to see the entire life of our friend represented here today. I don't know how and why God drew you two together, Mike, but it's for His glory. And that's good. I want to thank everyone who shared their memories and hearts today. As many of you know, it's not easy to find the words to honor a loved one or a friend. I took weeks thinking about what would I say. For weeks I sat down beside Neil's bed each day, and I laughed because I said, the reason we're together is because I can do this today. See, I don't have a job, Neil. Neither do you, so everybody else is working, so we're together, buddy. And we laugh about how God put us together, and I'd be working on some stuff, and I'd put my iPad on his bed like this each morning. And I'd say, I'm going to work, okay? You're going to lay there, and we're all good. And we just had that time together for weeks. So how do you capture that moment? It was difficult. So this past Saturday, as the snow piled up around us, I boiled some chicken noodle soup, looked at the gray skies and just prayed. And said, God, just give me the words. I mean, I miss my friends so much, like everybody else here does, but I'm blank. You see, Neil taught me about the importance of listening to the Spirit. He's a Spirit-led man, for sure. And so I said, Neil, what do you want these people to hear? What do you, Father, how do I honor Neil? And I heard this distinctly, talk about Neil's character. Not what he wore for clothes, or his cats, or his love of football. I too got the weekly text or daily text about the Raptors game, and I didn't watch the game. I just was always doing something. And the Lord told me, use his character to reveal a truth and make a point that Jesus is Lord. I guess I met Neil about 5 years ago, same as Zane. I didn't know that, but about 5 years ago, I know I was baptized at the church that year in 2012, and Neil was on the bread line, and I was the guy that had the privilege of delivering the bread to my friend Neil. And every week I did it wrong. Every week. He would he would lay into me and tell me, you don't know what you're doing, just leave the bread, don't put it on the table, you'll mix up the bagels with the wheat bread, with all this stuff, and oh, he got into me. But I knew Neil at that time of his life in only three ways. Neil was a man of solitude, of silence, and of prayer. I didn't have all the stories that many of you do today, but my view of Neil was silence, solitude, and prayer. So interestingly enough, among the cats, the puns, and the stories, I was led to a book by Henry Nouwen called The Way of the Heart. I'm not sure if you've heard about that or read it, but it begins with a story of St. Anthony. St. Anthony was commonly known as the father of the monks. Born in 251, Anthony was the son of an Egyptian peasant. When Anthony was 18 years old, he heard these words from Matthew 19, verse 21, "Go and sell everything you own and give money to the poor." St. Anthony took these words personally, and for a short time he worked and lived on the edge of a village as a poor laborer. Then he withdrew to the desert, and for the next 20 years he lived in complete solitude. During those years, it was reported that Anthony experienced terrible trial. The shell of his superficial securities was cracked, and the abyss of iniquity was open to Neil, or to St. Anthony. But he came out of this trial victorious. And this had nothing to do with his own willpower, but because of his unconditional surrender to the lordship of Jesus Christ. And when St. Anthony emerged from this solitude, people recognized in him the qualities and the character of an authentic, healthy man. A man in whole, in mind and body and soul. And many flocked to Anthony for healing, for comfort, and direction. In later years, he retired to even a deeper solitude to be absorbed in total communion with God. St. Anthony died an old man at 106 years old. And as I read that, I mean, it's hard because I'm seeing Neil in that story. I still have trouble. Do you see some of the parallels with St. Anthony and Neil there? Do you remember how he often withdrew? He liked solitude. But Neil had a way of drawing people into his life, just like St. Anthony did after he came through the desert experience and trials. I know for me, I received healing, comfort, and direction from Neil in abundance. Neil had a way of letting go, stepping back from what we would call normal life. The cool thing was that Neil didn't mind that. It was challenging. We wanted what we thought was a normal life for Neil in a way, and Neil wanted his own way. He could easily step out of the fast lane of noise and cell phones, schedules, text messages, and social media. He experienced surrender, in my mind. He was good at pulling out and just surrendering to Jesus. And you see, I believe that the reason many of us enjoy our time alone, that time of surrender, is the way of the heart. A way of drawing closer to Jesus, and Jesus drawing closer to us. Matthew said in his gospel in verse 11, "Come to me, all you are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." That's how I see Neil. Neil understood this verse in a very deep way, and he knew the meaning of weariness, of burdens, and a really busy life. But life was not always easy for Neil. It was said earlier. He was smart, he was talented, very funny, and he loved to make all of us laugh. But he could never really fit in. He couldn't really meet expectations sometimes. Until one time, I met a very special woman. I met her years ago. I visited her countless times, as many of you have done, and it was his mom. Mom was extremely special. Neil. When I met her, she was 92 years old. Today she's 95. 95. We celebrated her birthday a few months ago with cake and some dear friends that are here today. Lon was his spiritual leader. He shared so many memories of his mother. More memories than all of his friends combined. One day, we drove what seemed hours past a childhood home. He showed me every school that he ever attended, every schoolyard that he got into trouble, every restaurant that he attended or got into, or 7-Eleven. He painted for me a picture of his entire life, and it was good. But another man made also an impact in Neil's life, and that was his pastor Hal. Those deep spiritual roots that Neil talked about, that love of Jesus, came from the conversations and life experiences that he and Hal had experienced. Times in the forest, which I didn't get. The gun thing, I thought those guns were real. Because he doesn't tell that story of fake. He tells it like it's real. I thought he was crazy. I thought, what the heck? Where's the body buried? I would always ask him, like, this isn't good. And he'd never give me an answer. But his time at Bethlehem Lutheran was important because it was the time of spiritual revival. Evangelism at its peak in that neighborhood of Beverly and in the Bethlehem Lutheran Church. Those were very deep roots, like I saw. And the interesting thing is that Neil said this troubled him because he saw the world as good and as evil. And the problem was the community he saw around him was not radiant with the love of Jesus. It wasn't. He saw the world as good and bad. But his expectation was, we should all love Christ. Why don't they? Right? That's what he said. And that was frustrating to Neil. And he fell victim to the desires of the flesh. And he tried to cope with the troubles in this world. And it snuck up on him. And so, like St. Anthony, Neil quickly removed himself from the world, seeking that solitude in the desert. And this is the place I met Neil. I would guess many of you did. The We Care ministry was unbelievably important to Neil. There are so many people here today. Linda, I'm looking at you, and Tom, and everyone here. The We Care ministry was Neil's life. All of you from We Care that are here, to all of us. This was his life. This was the way of his heart. In fact, Neil was the first person I ever heard use pray in the Spirit and may the Spirit minister you to while you sleep. He'd say that to me all the time. I met Neil at a time when I was healthy, but then I quickly became sick. I still remember rolling my wheelchair around the parking lot in the snow. And in the world, I will say, I always felt judged. A guy that was diseased and couldn't walk. And I'd go to We Care and I'd say, you know, they don't judge you down there. You can just be anybody. It doesn't matter if you're in a wheelchair or what your story is. They can judge you. And Neil just loved me. He just loved me and everybody else. And at that point, our relationship changed. And I also saw a change in Neil. Again, to quote St. Anthony in that story I just read, in the later years, St. Anthony, he retired to even a deeper solitude to be totally absorbed in direct communion with God. That's how I would explain Neil in these last weeks, in this last few years, of even retrieving even more. And as he got sick, and we helped him through heart attacks and issues with different things. It wasn't a week or two that went by that I'd call Christina and I'm in the hospital. Neil wants me to call you. So many times, Zane? We'd be doing things, and Sean as well, and everybody. Neil started to remove himself from the world. But he wasn't running from the world. He was running to his Savior, Jesus. He knew the path that he was on. He knew that his time on earth was short, because we talked about it, but he wasn't scared. He wasn't full of anxiety. He was running to Jesus. I wrote a narrative today because it says, at this point in my writing on Saturday, I stopped. Because my phone rang on Saturday, and it was Bridget. If you're here, I'm not sure, but she said, "Hey, Doug, everything for the memorial is finished, and we've cremated Neil." And I was sad because he's gone. So I sat in reflection, stopped what I was doing here, had a bit of a pity party, and then these puns started coming to my mind, and I can't remember these puns. There's thousands of puns, and we're going to see that video shortly here. But he had a way of making us laugh. We'd go out for lunch, a bunch of us, and he would sit in Red Robin, and he would just pun after pun, and we just couldn't keep up. I'd look at Zane or Sean, I go, I don't even know what he's saying. It's too much. Stop. I want to close by returning to what I read from St. Anthony and that victorious escape that he made. The quote I said was, "This had nothing to do with his own willpower, but because of the unconditional surrender to our Lord Jesus Christ." I can't say that enough to talk about our friend Neil. If you yourself have questions today about lordship, about what it means to surrender your life, talk to a pastor, talk to the We Care family. They're all here. Don't miss out on what lordship means in your life. If you're asking, well, what's the hurry? Isn't Jesus about just going to heaven or avoiding hell? Like, Doug, what's the rush? Well, what would Neil say about that? And I have written here, Neil would say it can start right now, today. You can know Jesus, accept Jesus as your Lord and your Savior right now. That's what he would say. See, Neil believed in these words. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. But how would Neil say it? He would say, well, Jesus is your way, your truth, and your life. As it was said, Neil died unexpectedly. He fell asleep, which is what he wanted. He wanted to die peacefully and not in pain, and he did that. Jesus also said that he's coming back, and we talked about that. You see, every one of you that visited Neil said, isn't it great? You are going to meet Jesus face to face. We wrote scriptures on that whiteboard. Bob prayed lots and said it's good news that you're going to meet Jesus. My desire and my prayer for all of us is let's be ready for that. Let's be ready to meet Jesus. It could be today, tomorrow, in an hour. Neil knew he was going to meet Jesus expectantly. So we all agree moving forward to just take a look at our life and just wonder, what would it like to meet Jesus face to face? That could happen in a moment for all of us. And we should smile, because that made Neil smile. He never frowned about that. I pray that you will find solitude, silence, and prayer. Listen and seek the way of your heart. I want to end with a prayer that Neil and I said together the last time that we had prayer time. I didn't expect Neil to pass on Tuesday, and I think I punched him in the knee and I said, I'll be back in the morning. That's what I did to him. And we had a good laugh, but we also prayed a lot. This past Easter, it's thought that over 2 billion people around the world recite the Lord's Prayer together, in unison, in church services, schools, small groups all over the world. So let's pray together. Prayer that Neil and I said together in unison. So join me as we say in unison the Lord's Prayer. Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Give
us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us.
And lead us not into
temptation, but deliver us from evil.
For
Thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory,